Hello, everyone, and welcome back to What's Your Mess? Mental, Emotional, Social Status of Life. I am your host, Tracey D. Armstrong, and I'm here again with another amazing guest here to share her story of triumph and overcoming and how she was able to get through and come out of her MESS. But I'm going to be quiet and get out of the way and let her introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Jenn Fredricks, and I sure did have a mess. It started all the way back when I was 15 years old. I am currently a personal resilience practitioner and a pro-resilience coach or a proactive resilience coach. So everything that I've gone through in my mess has led me to where I am today. I'm also a mother, a wife, a daughter, a friend, a cat mom, and a lover of music.
Oh, awesome. Yes. All and the list goes on,
And on.
right?
Yeah.
And you said a resilience coach. Did I hear
Yeah.
that correctly? Wow.
Pro-resilience, yeah. So it's
I love
proactive
that.
plus resilience put together. Pro-resilience coach.
Yes, I love it. I love it. I have never heard that before. That's why I was like, wait a minute, is she yes, proactive and resilient put together. But I know that that hasn't always been your status of life and where you are now. So let's tell the audience a little bit about, you say it started back from when you were 15. Do you want to start there?
Yeah, let's start there. I was 15 years old and dealing with some chronic illness and finally got a diagnosis of chronic kidney disease when I was 14 and then leading into 15 and received my first kidney transplant from my dad when I was 15 years old. Yeah, I was super blessed.
At 15, you had a kidney transplant?
I sure did. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about how did that affect you? We'll start mentally.
Let's
First, the
start
fact,
mentally.
yeah.
Well, so I said first transplant because I had a second transplant in 2012. So I'm going to focus on mentally how it affected me when I was 15. And I would say that I've always sort of been a positive person, but also then when you mix that with being a teenager and you feel like you're immortal anyway, it was pretty much like, okay, yeah, this is the problem. You know how to fix it. So let's fix me. It wasn't always that simple day to day, but I think overarchingly, that's sort of the vibe that I had. There were days where I felt very isolated, very sad, worn down physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, all of those things. Yet I had just this trust in knowing that it was all going to work out. And so I had a really great support system of friends and a care team and wonderful modeling and influencing, shown to me by my parents. And so I was able to really be in a okay mental space for someone at that age dealing with something of that magnitude. And also it was very interesting. Like I never really wanted to go talk to the teen support group or work with the social worker or counselor or psychologist for whatever reason at that time. I think it might have been the mindset of, yeah, let's do this and then get back to normal.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine because I work with teenagers, and as a social and emotional learning teacher, I know that teenagers and emotions are all over the place. And you're
Yeah.
saying at 14 and 15, you're having to go through this particular challenge emotionally. You kind of touched on it a little bit, but
Mhm.
emotionally, how did that impact your life as a teenager?
It was interesting. I was really thinking about that lately. And looking back, and I can see the moments where I allowed myself to feel the sadness or the confusion and allow myself to cry and express those emotions. But for the most part, I really think I was trying to be a good patient. I don't know if that
Mm.
makes sense, but I think it was I'm not as much of a people pleaser now as I was then. And so I think that may have taken center stage when I was 15 and emotionally, I let myself cry and whatnot. But then it was always like, okay, how can we move forward and how can I do my best to help the doctors do their best and not put too much on my parents and not have my friends worry. So I think a lot of the emotion could have been masked for a while. But that's what I've come up with lately around that.
That makes sense. That makes sense. And like you kind of said, you're not as much of a people pleaser now, but then you were like, okay, let me do what I need to do so I can make sure it's good for the doctor. And you
Mhm.
look sound like you were looking out for everyone else and trying to make sure you didn't burden your parents and burden your friends and things like that. So how did that affect you socially? Because sounds like you had friends. Sounds like you were living this like teenage life, right?
I really was. It's so weird because I actually lived in a very small town in upstate New York at the time. And right before moving there, we had lived in Houston, Texas, and the doctors really weren't able to pinpoint why I was feeling so much fatigue and having a lot of illness. And so we moved to this small town in upstate New York, and my pediatrician there did some blood work and found the chronic kidney disease. And so I was very into theater at the time and singing. And so right away we moved to this new town. I joined the high school theater troupe. There was another great community theater in the area. And so I got really involved in that before my health really took a nosedive. And so I think I built a lot of that foundation there, that I had the support with me even when I wasn't with them. But yeah, you're right. I mean, I was out, like, I had friends that had a car, and so they'd pick me up and we'd, go hang out and have bonfires and whatever. But my treatment center was actually about 2 hours away from where we lived at the time. And before I had my transplant, I needed to have about 6 months of dialysis, which is, for me, it was a 3-hour process 3 times a week. And since we lived in such a small town, we're like, let's go to the next biggest city where there was a children's hospital. And so my dear mother would drive me 2 hours one way to have a 3-hour dialysis appointment and drive me 2 hours home 3 times a week. And so while I may have felt isolated from, like, being a teenager, I never felt alone in that respect because my mom and dad were just great caretakers. Um, when I did have to be in the hospital for quite a long time after my transplant, and I'm 2 hours away from friends, I did feel lonely at times. And I have to say that everyone tried to do what they could to support me. Like, even I was supposed to be in a production of Jesus Christ Superstar, and I had to drop out because it was right when I started dialysis. And their opening night, and this is before cell phones, really, their
Mhm.
opening night, they called long distance. And my mom put the phone next to my ear so I could listen to the full production of my friends doing this musical that I had been rehearsing for. And so these small moments of kindness that people extended to me did help support me socially, even though I wasn't right there with the group.
Mhm. Now, first of all, that was really cool. That was really cool. That was really cool. The fact that they would do that and that way you could still be a part of it. And then I'm just thinking, because as a parent, like driving 2 hours, that's another city, and then sitting there 3, and I know like it takes time, the dialysis part, and then driving back. Literally, that's a
Yeah.
half a day.
Yeah.
And having
Yeah.
to do that 3 times a week. Wow. So, did this affect your status of life with that? Because I know, like, not
Mhm.
being able to fully participate in school and things
Mhm.
like that. But was there any, did it like affect your parents or anything with that type of
Mhm.
situation?
You know, Not so much. I was in a very privileged spot, I would say. My mom was already pretty much staying at home. She was a special education teacher. And then when we moved to the small town, she did not get her substitute teaching certificate or whatever for the town. So she was home and able to take care of me. And my dad was very dedicated to us as well as his job. And so, and we had wonderful insurance, right? So I had all of the foundation that I needed to help support me in that way, so that we didn't have to worry so much about, I mean, yes, I was working to survive, like actually live, but we had a really good foundation, and support, financially and with insurance. So it didn't really change the status of life for our family at that time, which we were all really grateful for.
So, but with all of this, You also, I'm going back to some
Uh-huh.
things that you said, because you also said this started then, but you had another transplant. So can we talk about what happened from the first transplant to 2012?
Sure. I mean, I was very lucky. My dad was my donor.
Mm.
I forgot to mention that. So he did have, a couple months of recovery. So that probably changed his status of life because he wasn't able to go into work. But um, he allowed me to have 18 years of experiences and memories and quote unquote normal life with his donation. I was able to finish high school, go to college, get a degree, met my husband. We adopted a beautiful daughter, bought a house. I had a great career in marketing, and then my kidney was just like, "I'm tired. Well, see you later." And so it just slowly stopped working as well as it could for me. And so I went back to my transplant center. I'm now living in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and that's where my second transplant happened. And I was super blessed again that my husband's fraternal twin brother was a match. And
Wow.
so, yeah, and I married into the right family, right? So
Exactly.
in 2012, he donated a kidney to me, and we're 12 years out from that transplant. And again, he's afforded me the opportunity to so many wonderful life experiences, and being here for my husband and my daughter and everything. So I will say that the mental part of the second transplant was very different from my first experience. I was in my 30s at that time. I was married, had a 4-year-old daughter, and it was more like, it was sort of the mindset of get back to normal life, but there was more fear that accompanied it.
Mhm.
More like, what if this doesn't work out? What happens if I don't, if I'm not able to keep the kidney and I get really, really sick or whatever. And so there was a lot more quote unquote on the line with the second transplant mentally. And I did struggle with that quite a bit, and reached out to my care team, who was very, very supportive, and, were willing to offer some medication as well as some support help. And at the same time, I had to go through dialysis again for about 6 months. I didn't want to put more things into my body that maybe I could find another way to support myself mentally. And so I actually started then looking for guided imagery, meditation, mindfulness, a lot of those types of practices that I did during dialysis leading up to my second transplant.
Okay, and you're going right where I was about to go. Because I was just about to say, because I can imagine what you just said. At 15, your mental state was, okay, let's do this, let's fix it. You know what's wrong with me, fix me, let's go.
Hmm.
And kept being a teenager. Now in your 30s, it's like, wait a minute, I have all of these people depending on me. I have all these things that I need to do. I don't have time for this kidney to be malfunctioning.
Right.
And so from that mental state, you started to have a different way of coping and dealing. So can you tell us a little bit about from there, how did you start to come out of that? How did you start to clean up that particular mess?
Sure. Well, I really focused on being present with myself. I know that's easy for me to say, and maybe people aren't sure what that means. And so I spent time listening to guided meditations, and specifically ones that were um, made for people who were going through medical diagnoses or crises. And read a book called Medical Meditations, which was wonderful. That gave me like practical, applicable tools that I could use as I'm either sitting in the dialysis chair to help keep my mind centered and not going into the future with too much worry and anxiety, because that can paralyze us. Or one, I remember sitting in the pre-op triage before I actually had to have my original transplanted kidney removed before I could actually have a new transplant. I remember sitting there and I was just like beside myself. I don't know, I don't even know where my mind was, but I was able to call to my attention one of the medical meditations I had read about, where you find a spot on the wall and then you find another spot and you focus and try to bring them together. And so I vividly remember two shapes of diamonds on like the triage curtain that the nurses would pull around you. And I focused on those and tried to bring them together. And of course, anytime my mind would wander or my emotions would start to well up, I would lose the diamond. And so I'd be able to start again. And that really helped me in that moment to bring myself some centeredness
Mhm.
so that I didn't lose it.
No, that's great. That's a really good way of handling that, especially like when your emotions are trying to creep up and make you feel a certain way, and finding that spot, it makes you focus. And like you said, trying to be more present and not thinking about the future and the what ifs, that's gonna cause all of that anxiety and that fear to creep up. And so one other question. What advice would you give to someone who may be going through a similar situation that you've gone through?
Oh, that's a big one. I think first, reaching out for support, whether that be your community, your care team, your family who might understand, or a support group or a support person who has gone through something similar. Just being able to feel that sense of connection as a chronic illness patient is important. So let's start there, because once we can connect, we know that we're not alone. We can see examples of other people and how they have moved through a challenge like this. And so that's, I would say, the very first thing would be connect.
That's good. And that's my next question. If someone did want to connect with you, like you said, talking to someone who's gone through the similar situation,
Yeah,
how can they connect with you?
I'm going to try to make it really simple. Why don't you reach out to me on Instagram at jfredwi? Just DM me, connect. And then I'll reach back out to you and I'll ask you, what is something that you'd like to connect about? And this isn't a hard sell. This is me getting to know you and giving you an example of something that can help you through this challenging time. And then if we connect and you would like more support, we can talk about that. But let's get you to a place where you're feeling connected and not isolated, where you're able to have one piece of something to support you as you move through the challenge.
Exactly. Having at least one piece of something. And you said you do coaching as well. So, what kind of coaching do you do exactly? Could you explain?
Sure. Yeah. Well, so I'm a personal resilience practitioner and as well as a pro resilience coach. So I do help people meet their benchmark of resilience. And I like to think of resilience as like being able to maintain high levels of effectiveness and well being while dealing with high levels of challenge and disruption. And so we work to bring you to your benchmark where you feel supported. And then we can take a look at the other building blocks of resilience to get you ready for future challenges. And as chronic illness patients or a caregiver for chronic illness patients, we know that that future is on the horizon, right? We know that these things are going to keep coming into our lives, and we deserve to be supported in a way where we don't have to wait until things are all better to live better. And that's my aim, is to be a place of comfort and connection for people and give you some skills that you can practice and have like the muscle memory for when challenges come into your life.
Yes, and I love that. You said how they don't have to wait till everything gets better in order to live better. That is so good because you can start living now, even while you're going through the situation and you're going through the challenges. And I just want to thank you for sharing your story. I really appreciate you bringing this to the light because I know that there's many people out there in the audience that may be listening that may either be going through the chronic kidney disease or have someone that they know that's
Mhm.
gone through it, or maybe a caregiver.
Right.
So yeah, so that's what I was going to say. So what would be some last words of encouragement that you could leave with them that may be listening?
It would be because I'm also a caregiver myself for my daughter. She has a chronic illness, and when I was feeling isolated and unprepared, the one thing I really refocused on is that this is the one chance at life that we have. And who do I want to be for her as she's moving through her challenges? Do I want to be a place of anxiety and fear and worry and like the sterility of being in a hospital and that sort of thing? Or do I want to be a place of love and comfort and humor and laughter and warmth of home? And so I would ask everyone just to take a moment, be with yourself, and ask you, who do I want to be for myself in this challenge? And or who do I want to be for my loved one?
That's a good one. Who do I want to be in this challenge? And who do I want to be for my loved one? Oh, amazing. Amazing, amazing. And before we wrap up, I just want to say thank you for sharing. Thank you for coming on. And everyone out there, I will have all of her information at the end of the video. So make sure you check out the links and you connect with her. And if you're going through any type of similar situation, find that support system. Because would you say that, and this is my last question for you, okay? If you did not have the support system that you did have, how do I know this is a trick, might
This
be
is
a
a
tough
big
one,
one.
because I'll just throw this one in there. If you did not have that support system, how do you think things may have been different?
Thinking of before I've come through the mess, I believe there probably would have been a lot more struggle and a lot more to work through now, or after I like went through the transplant or went through the initial treatment for my daughter's illness. Being able to have that support and just know that there's someone out there who, one, does care about you, even if they don't know exactly what you're going through, or two, knows exactly what you're going through. It just connects us to our humanity and allows us to feel completely human rather than just this quote unquote, just this person going through this challenge. It
Mhm.
allows us to be whole as we move through the challenge.
Mm, I love it. I love it. Again, thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your testimony. And thank you for bringing this message to the audience. Again, we're wrapping up another amazing episode of What's Your Mess? Now, before I leave you all, I want to leave you with this powerful quote to carry with you throughout your days. If you want to be sad, keep thinking about the past. If you want to be anxious or worried, think about the future. But if you want to be happy, focus on the present day and be grateful for what you have. This is Tracey D. Armstrong with What's Your Mess? Have a good one, y'all.